What is up, everybody? My name is Alex, and this is the WMD Digital VCA Mark III. So the Digital VCA Mark III is a successor of the original Digital VCA and the second version, the DVCA. The original version was 6 HP, the second was 4. As you can tell, this one is a nice, full-featured 8 HP module. Basically, it's a dual VCA, and you've got full feature sets, so full sets of knobs and switches and CV inputs for both VCAs. So the original ones, you always lost a couple of things on that second channel, and this one gives you every option on both channels, plus a few features borrowed from the multi-mode VCA, another legacy VCA of WMD's, as well as some new features. So the first thing I want to talk about is something that might cause a little bit of confusion. So if you plug the output just straight into your input here, and you have the switch set to instant mode, you might hear some white noise. And this is because of some normaling. So basically we have white noise normaled to the CV input, and this is for one of the update features. So the update is basically a sample and hold, and the noise is a voltage source that you can sample. And so you might be asking, why is the noise reaching the output if it's only normaled to the CVA input? And that's because we also have 5 volts normaled to the VCA's input. And this is so you can do things like have your bias knob be an offset, or use the sample and hold feature for voltage outputs without having to run an offset into there. And so for features like that. And so basically the CV input is controlling the level of that 5-volt signal, and what that turns into is noise on the output. So to stop the noise, all you gotta do is either turn down your CV knob, or just plug something into either the CVA input or CV input in general of the VCA, or the VCA input. That's going to cut out the noise. So now that we got that out of the way, let's get into it. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm just going to run a sine wave into the digital VCA's input, and we're going to run out of that into the data here. And then we're going to go out of the data into the mixer. And again, when we turn that up, it's going to sound kind of noisy. And that's because we've got that 5-volt, or we've got that noise routed to the CV input here. So with the CV input up, we've just got noise controlling the VCA. So if we turn that all the way down, just like any other VCA, we now stop that signal. And now you can see when I turn up the bias knob, we basically get volume out of the VCA. So a VCA is basically, it's called a voltage controlled amplifier. I like to think of them as voltage controlled attenuators, because what they really do is they stop the signal, right? So an oscillator is always sending signal, and a VCA is the thing that makes it so it can become rhythmic. It stops the signal and then only allows that signal when you tell it to. So the bias knob, you can tell the signal to go through the VCA just with a knob. And one of the things that's nice about this is you can use it basically like an offset, right? So if you do this and then send CV through it, you're going to have this be your 0 point, but now you can add a little bit more. So that's great for things like modulation, but when we're running audio through, we usually want to keep bias all the way down. And now what we're going to do is we're just going to run an envelope into the CV input, and I'm going to take my Metron here and output on my Metron, and I'm going to trigger my envelope with this gate here. I'm going to try and keep it out of the way of the data so we can really see what's going on. So moving some cables around just to make sure that that looks good here. And then I need to switch some settings on my data again here. I'm just going to switch this up. There we go. So now you can see this blue line, this is my envelope signal, right? And now when I turn up the CV amount, you can hear that we're getting a rhythmic thing coming out of here. And as we turn up the envelope, obviously turn up the release on the envelope, the release of the signal goes longer. We can make it shorter and shorter. So if we listen real closely, you'll hear some clicks and pops, right? And it's kind of inconsistent. And that's really on that attack, so the super fast attack. That's because our Javelin envelope is really fast, is a really fast envelope. And so a lot of people love these fast, snappy envelopes, but one of the characteristics of this is that it can cause clicks and pops. And so why this is happening is basically, you can see in data here, if I zoom in even more, and then I'm just going to stop this and take a snapshot somewhere. Let's try it there. So now you can see this green wave. This is our sine wave from Legion. And when the VCA is being turned on, it's in the middle of a duty cycle. And so a sine wave is a very smooth waveform. And what's happening is we're creating a very hard edge on that sine wave. We're basically creating a square edge on that because we're starting in the middle of the waveform. And so that's where the pop comes from. And it's inconsistent because basically whenever that envelope happens, it's going to be at a different point in that waveform. So if I run it again and stop it again, you can see now it started kind of near zero. Do it again. Stop it here, it's starting on the negative side. So it's always going to sound a little bit different. And so what the Digital VCA does to, the feature that the Digital VCA has to battle this is a zero crossing detector. So this entire time we've been in instant mode, right? And instant is going to be great if you just want to use like LFOs to control it, or slower envelopes, things where you don't have really fast attacks or really fast releases, right? So, but if you start hearing clicks and pops, you can pop the switch over to ZCD, which is Zero Crossing Detector. So now you can see right here, we've still got this blue line is our envelope, and the green line is, again, our Legion oscillator. And you can see that this isn't going to open the VCA, so it's not going to allow any amplitude from that oscillator through until it reaches zero. So if you reach zero voltage, basically that means that speaker is in, just resting mode, and it's not pushing or pulling. And so when you start from zero, now you get that smooth waveform all the way through, and now your clicks and pops disappear. And so this is kind of one of the main features of the Digital VCA. You get two of these, and you get no more clicks and pops. So for big 808 kick drum style things, and anything where you really want like a nice attack, but you don't want an inconsistent front end pop, this is going to be a good example, or a good option. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the trigger mode of this VCA. And so this is another feature that's carried over from the original Digital VCA and the DVCA, which was the Mark II. And basically this is like a sample and hold. And so if you think about the zero crossing detector, that's basically a sample and hold as well, except for the trigger is the zero crossing moment. So once it hits zero, that is the triggering moment that's going to allow the VCA to move. The VCA does not move until there's a zero hit. And the trigger mode basically replaces that with an update jack. So what we'll do real quick is we'll run that audio through here again, and nothing's happening. We can turn up the bias knob and nothing's going to happen now because we've got it set to trigger mode, right? So again, instant mode, we can move it around. Oh, I got to do this. Zero crossing mode, we can move it around. We go to trigger mode, we get nothing. And that's because it's waiting for a trigger on the update jack to move to the next thing. So basically, to show this very, very simply, I'm just going to take an output of my Metron, put it in the update jack, and then I'm just going to go over here to fill effects so that way I can do a manual gate, right? So now I'm sending this a manual gate, and we can hear that since I sent one and the bias was up, that's where we got that's where the VCA level was, right? So if I move this around, we can do, we can basically just use this as our CV input, right? And so it doesn't change until I send it a trigger, right? So now if we go to CV input A, I can leave bias down, and because we have noise normaled into CV input A, if I hit a trigger, we're just going to get a random level. So this is great for things like if you're running modulation through the VCA instead of just straight audio. So to show that, we're just going to listen to the sine wave output, right? And we're going to run a sine wave through the Digital VCA MKIII. We're going to run it through there, and we're going to take that and put it into we'll put it into exponential FM just so it's real apparent of what's going on. And then we'll start sending some updates to this. And now we've got different levels of modulation every time we hit it with a trigger. So if we go up like, right? So that white noise is what we're sampling. We could also sample a voltage source. So if we go into CVA and run like a looping envelope into this thing, every time we send in a trigger, it's going to be a different level. So if we go into LFO mode on the Legion, the modulator, again, we get different levels of modulation every time we hit it with another trigger. That was fun. So this can be cool for ambient performances and just like, like I said, modulation levels. Let your imagination go wild with that one. And then just to talk about the normaling real quick, I said, you saw that we had the noise normaled into the CV input. So if I take the output out and we just listen to this sine wave, and let's do this update again real quick. I'm just going to take the output of the VCA, I'm going to run it straight into, let's just do the volt per octave of the oscillator. So now every time I hit that update jack, we're sending a different voltage out because we have 5 volts routed into the input as a normal. And so if nothing's plugged into this, we get 5 volts out. Or we get 5 volts in that input. And so now, again, we're sampling noise on the input of the CVA because there's nothing in there. And then the output of this is basically, we've got, an attenuated version of a 5 volt signal. So if we take the CV input again and use the looping envelope and use the output of that to sample, go lower register here. Now we do a real slow envelope up and down. And I'm just going to send this guy 16th notes now. And if our trigger signal is faster than our envelope signal, then we'll just hear it go up and down. So I'm just going to turn this into some bursts real quick. There we go. So you can use this as kind of a downsampling thing if you want to. There we go. Downsample a modulation source or anything like that. Make it steppy. This is a great version for that. But yeah, just kind of a fun feature. And that's why, again, we have that 5 volts routed to the input of the VCA, and we have the noise routed to the CVA. That's so you can do fun and experimental things like this. All right, so moving on, now we're going to talk about amplitude modulation and the bipolar VCA functions of the Digital VCA MKIII. So when I'm talking about amplitude modulation, what I am talking about is basically audio rate modulation of the amplitude of the signal. And so what we're going to do here is we're just going to look at this on a spectrum analyzer so we can see what harmonics are getting added and taken away when we do this modulation. And so what we do here is I'm just running a sine wave into the CV input. I've got these two Legion oscillators tuned to the same frequency. And so right now, if we just listen again, move this guy up, we can hear we have a 500 hertz signal. And so this whole time we've had these two switches down towards the VCA indicator. And so on the bipolar VCA side, it's a little bit different. So I'm going to show that. So on the VCA side, we have 0 down here on the bias, and as we turn that up, we get volume, right? Well, on the bipolar side, we're going to get volume on the left-hand side, 0 in the middle, and volume on the right-hand side. And what we're actually getting on the left-hand side is an inverted copy of the original signal. So on the right-hand side, we get the original signal, and on the left-hand side, we get an inverted version. So a version with inverted phase, basically. And so if we run an LFO into the CV here and we listen to it, right now you can see I've got it in bipolar mode and my LFO is going here, and this is running and it's going positive and negative and positive and negative, right? And if we flip down to the normal VCA mode, we're going to have that frequency. So we go up here, twice as fast. Here, it's slower. But again, because it's inverting the phase, the magic happens when we go into audio rate. So if I go up here, we just listen to the VCA sound. You can see we have that 500 hertz signal, and I've got another one that we're adding on top of it. And so this is adding harmonics on top, and we've got 1K and 1.5K on the harmonics that we're adding, right? If I go up or down in semitones, we still hear that fundamental, but then we get different harmonics for different character. And so this is a wonderful way of just getting more harmonics out of a sine wave and doing some cool modulation to get more harmonics without losing your fundamental. It's different from FM because you don't go out of tune when you're adding those harmonics, and that's a nice feature of amplitude modulation. So then ring modulation, if we go up here, we're gonna see all these harmonics. Let's go back to the 1K and 5K. We're gonna put the bias in the middle because that's our 0, right? And then we're gonna flip up. You can see we lost that 500 hertz signal. We've just got the 1K. And as I move up in semitones, oh, I'm doing octaves right now, excuse me. You can see we just move up in the octaves of those harmonics. And if we move up in semitones, we start to get the difference of the two as well. So we get the addition of the two frequencies and we get the subtraction of the two frequencies. So those are two classic sounds that are both useful in their own right. So ring modulation is fun to use on more complex like characteristics. You know, it's a popular guitar effect, and I'd say just experiment with that on things that are not just a sine wave, but you know, just to show you exactly what it's doing. A sine wave just makes a lot of sense. And so now if we go and we take the modulator oscillator and we take that down to be in a lower register than the carrier, we can get some cool sounds with the ZCD. So if we turn that on, you can hear it just gets a little bit harsher. And now if we flip up to bipolar VCA for the ring mod, and go back to instant mode. So the next thing I want to talk about is the normaling of the B inputs and do a dual VCA patch and what we might want to use that for. So for this one, again, I'm going to do the ring mod thing. So we're going to just listen to this guy real quick. We're going to run, or I'm probably going to do amplitude modulation, but you know what I mean. And so if we want to stop this, we can run this into the second VCA. Now we're hearing the output of A, so I just patched those together. And then what I might want to do here is use a normal VCA on this one. And then right now we're using the A input, again, is our CV input, so I'm going to want to plug something in there. And now I'm going to take that out of my envelope. Use a different cable real quick. So we'll turn off looping. And then we'll add a gate signal, turn the attack down. And And now basically we've got the first one handling our amplitude modulation and the second one handling our rhythmic stuff. So now if we were to just, you know, send in some voltage here, just for fun, into the 1 volt per octaves, we got to do both because we're modulating the amplitude of this legion with this one. Record in some bleeps and bloops. Slow this down a little bit. Maybe make sure that these all match. There we go. So again, we're using this one to create the character, and we're using this one to be rhythmic. Kind of hearing a few of those pops, turning that one into ZCD so that way I don't get those pops anymore. All right, and so the last thing I want to talk about is the mixing capabilities of the Digital VCA. You've probably noticed that there's an output A plus B on here, and this is so you can use this as a simple mixer. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take a triangle wave, run that into A, take another triangle wave, run that into B here, and then we'll go to instant mode again, turn the CVs down, and then we'll just listen to the bias at first. Let's see what's going on here. Got that. Oh, I've got that not even going into an input. So we need to take output A, run it into the input of the mixer, and there we go. We're hearing this one. Now we can add this guy. So if you just want a simple if you just need a simple 2-channel mixer, now you've got it. Another thing about that normaling, we'll run the gate signal into the envelope again. We'll take an envelope, we'll run it into CVA here. We'll turn these down, we'll turn up CVA. Now you can hear that CVA is being affected. And so if we look at B jack here, we can either choose noise or we can choose A. So we can use the sample and hold feature, or we can use the envelope signal that's coming into the CV input A. And so now if I turn that up, we can basically choose an envelope amount for that second oscillator. So nothing, just a little bit, a ton. So if we set where we want that to be, and now we just need that envelope amount to come down a little bit, we can use A to do that. Because we're using the input of CVA as CVB. So that's a nice normaling feature. You don't really have to think about CVB because it's being controlled by CVA. So one thing I have not explained yet is the ZCD outputs. And this is just basically a trigger every time your input, your signal at the input crosses the 0 threshold. If we were to just patch this into the update jack, this is going to be the same thing as moving over to ZCD. So basically, it's a sample and hold, and if you take this and just run it into that and use trigger mode, it's going to be the same thing. So this is just that signal broken out, and just wanted to explain that because I know I had forgotten it. All right, so that is it. That is the Digital VCA Mark III. As you can tell, it's a super deep module for a dual VCA. It's got a lot of features, but you know, the zero crossing alone is super helpful to any patch, but then being able to just use it as so many different modules in your patch or in your synthesis life really makes it a very valid companion to any eurorack module setup. So thank you so much for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe to the WMD YouTube channel. William is going to continue putting out modules. I'm going to continue making videos for him. And yeah, we're super excited for this next chapter. So don't go anywhere. We will see you all soon. Have fun patching. Peace.